Yes, okay.
Oh, let's do that.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Uttare Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Bhagavate Deve Auravani Acharine Nirvasesha Namaste Bhagavate Devi Auravani Acharine Nirvasesha Sanyana Astyata Shaka Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gauravaita Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gauravaita Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Bolo, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Gauranga Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Oh Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glorious to the assembled devotees. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Bridget Madanga ki jai. Srila Prabhupada's Muda mission ki jai. Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll hand over.
Welcome. Thank you, Maharaj. Warm welcome to His Holiness Janananda Maharaj. Thank you for the wonderful kirtan. Thank you for all the devotees and everyone for joining this morning. The LCBS retreat, celebrating Srila Prabhupada's 125th anniversary, appearance anniversary this year. I'll just give a small introduction to Maharaj. Some people might not know about Maharaj, so I'll just give a small introduction. His Holiness Janananda Maharaj joined ISKCON in London and was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1972. Since then, Maharaja has served in various countries around the world, including Africa, translating books into Swahili.
Not translating. Editing sometimes, and proofreading, but not translating. I don't speak Swahili, but working on books.
Working on books, sorry, Maharaj. In the last few years, he's really dedicated himself to supporting the ISKCON France Yatra. For most of the lockdown, Maharaj has been serving at ISKCON New Mayapur in France, engaging in many services there, supporting the devotees and maintaining the project there. New Mayapur is a farm community there that Srila Prabhupada visited for about 3 or 4 times. And we're just very honored and pleased Maharaj has joined us today. And he's going to be speaking about living with Srila Prabhupada today. It's a very interesting topic Maharaj has chosen. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Maharaj. Maharaj.
I really thank you for that very short introduction. It's really good. Well, thank you for inviting us today on this, what do you call it, sort of a session with the devotees there in London on trying to enter more into Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission in our Krishna consciousness movement. The devotees here today are gathered from London and from Europe and India and Asia and Australasia mainly, New Zealand, Australia a little bit. So from different parts of the world. And it's interesting because we're trying to discuss a little bit about mood and mission. I think the title today is Mood and Mission, but it's a little bit more than just mood and mission. It's discussing the, let's say in the context of our present situation, living with Srila Prabhupada today. And perhaps, I don't know how you've advertised it, but perhaps on your advertisement there, you may have included a line from a poem or stanza by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a famous stanza from one of his many poems. And it goes like this: dwell not the past that sleeps, nor ere the future dream at all, but live with times that are with thee, and progress ye shall call. It's a very, you could say, informative verse. It's something which we can all learn a lot from. And it's also something which has to be understood in context. And when we talk about living with Srila Prabhupada today, it's not just a sentiment, and it's not just, you could say, a philosophical application. It's a question of understanding the mission of Prabhupada. But in many ways, understanding his mood is essential. Otherwise, we may misrepresent the mission. Similarly with this verse of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Dwell not the past that sleeps, nor ere the future dream at all, but live with times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call. It's could be taken literally, and in some circumstances we would take it literally. In some circumstances, we would, in all circumstances, in one sense, we have to take a little bit of a deeper look at the meaning of dwell not the past that sleeps. Srila Prabhupada pastimes, Srila Prabhupada's activities, even the past history of Srila Prabhupada's movement, and that of our acharyas, what to speak also of Krishna or any of the avatars, are not sleeping. They may be, relatively speaking, seen as past from our perspective. We have our early life, maybe previous lifetimes. There's the history of the world. To a large extent, this is sleeping. It may have formulated the present situation, but in essence, it's sleeping. In fact, all of the past, present, and future of this world are basically in the category of sleep, because the soul is more or less dormant, unaware of its actual nature, identifying with the passing nature around us. Whereas we see in Srimad Bhagavatam is full of histories, other than the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada, which also some people say are dated, are past. They're gone. We're in a different era. But we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or any Vedic scripture, more or less, that they're ever fresh, and they're just as relevant today as they ever were. It's not necessarily the dress, it's not necessarily the details, the names, the externals, the figures and dates and so on, but it's the essential mood or the spirit they're in. They have a saying, we have to follow the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. One may blindly follow the letter of the law. That means as it is written, full stop, without understanding the purpose of that which is written. The purpose of that which is written, or the spirit of the law, is the essential purpose of the law, to awaken the spirit. Anyone can be a machine, robotic clone, but that's not the purpose of scripture. It's not the purpose of the Acharya to make clones. It's not his purpose to make clowns either. Purpose is to awaken the spirit, to awaken the soul's identity, nature, and all of the various rules and regulations, and according to time, place, and circumstance, are meant to awaken that spirit essence, the essential spirit. Now, along with that, we can understand also that to hear about these transcendental pastimes of Srila Prabhupada and his mission and his movement, we'd say somewhat interchangeable, or to hear about acharyas, in the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to hear these subject matters awakens within us confidence, determination, courage, and satisfaction, which we very much need, you could say, in our mood of Krishna consciousness, because they are ever fresh. These acharyas are not living on the material platform. They're not under the laws of nature. They're under the spirit of Krishna consciousness. And that is eternal. He reasons ill who tell that Vaishnavas die while they are living still in sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy life around. They're forever existing. So Srila Prabhupada's words are as relevant today as they ever were. What is to be, let's say, looked at? So we can describe that in a sense as a mission. He's written his mission statement in his books, and in other forms too, the incorporation document of ISKCON, many instructions which he gave, etc., expressing his mission. And literally speaking, Prabhupada said different things in different places, probably aware of that, in terms of his mission, even what to speak of, instructions on what is most important, service, what an individual should do, certain etiquettes and principles, rules and regulations were applied differently and appear to be different in different time, place, and circumstances, sometimes creating confusion in the devotee's minds. They take a statement which was in a particular context and try to apply it in a different context, and it doesn't seem to fit. So there's, say, a science of understanding how to apply the myriad of different instructions or different emphasis which Srila Prabhupada or any of our acharyas may have placed on a particular subject. For instance, in the case of a mission, we could say mission is a little like the letter of the law in some ways. Depends how we interpret it, but let's take it like that. When Prabhupada said many things, my mission, I mean, if you look through, you'll never come to an end practically. Prabhupada says, my mission is to, okay, serve my guru. That's a clear one. My mission is to make one pure devotee. But these, you can see these are, some are more exclusive, some are more inclusive. To make one pure devotee, Prabhupada said, that's my mission. To stop crime in a different circumstances, see, depending on where Prabhupada was and who he was addressing and, you know, what situation the movement was in. And he was talking to Lieutenant Mosey. My mission is to stop crime. He was a police officer. As we know, there's a lot more to Prabhupada's mission. Well, in one sense, we could take it that if we interpret crime in its broadest aspect. To get everyone to chant Hare Krishna. Okay, that's pretty broad. To preach the philosophy, most of them are pretty broad. To develop the glories of Srila Jiva Goswami, you probably never thought of that one, because he's speaking to an Indian scholar. Spread Krishna consciousness in the West, okay? He's preaching to Indians, but he said clearly to us, his mission was to preach in India. Although his Guru Maharaj's mission was to preach in the West, so time and circumstance. Establish hundreds and thousands of temples, okay? Then later on he said, enough temples, now we need restaurants and reading rooms. Temples can come later if there's a congregation, time, place, and circumstance. Awaken God Consciousness. Yes, he's talking to people of other religions. Their business is not to convert, our business is to awaken. It's a revolution, to return to our original consciousness. It doesn't depend upon necessarily a identity or a particular set of principles, rules, or whatever it is. If one religious, whatever religion one in, Prabhupada say, if it helps us to develop our actual genuine love of God, it is good. It's not a question of this one's right and wrong, it's that which works. And this is a very important principle in Prabhupada's mood, which we'll come on to in a minute. The mission side of it, you could say, is not so difficult. It's a missionary movement to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada would say, all over the world, to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. Like you go on and on and on with a list like that to deliver the fallen and so on. But the essential thing we're going to try to look at today is how to apply, you could say, the mission, or how to establish the mission of Srila Prabhupada's mission to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, following the instructions of his spiritual master and in the right spirit, or what is the mood? The mood is the spirit, and it's the spirit which has to be, let's say, captured or applied. And of course, the intelligence has to be there to understand time, place, and circumstances in terms of the mission also. But the spirit has to be essentially clear. So in general terms, when we say mood, you know, I'm in a bad mood today, I'm in a good mood today, I'm in a, you know, whatever mood it is today, you know. This is based on a material condition. It's not absolute. It is different than the mood of a pure devotee. we tend to make our decisions in life based upon the mood which we're in, even in Krishna consciousness, how I feel. I don't like this, I like that, I feel this, I feel that, etc. And we generally look at everything, including Krishna consciousness, with ourselves in the center. Now, Acharya, like Srila Prabhupada, does not do that. He understands that those around him are acting on that platform. So therefore, he's very dexterous or very broad-minded in seeing how to, with their present condition, their present mood, how to bring them or release them from the conditioning which we're in. The pure devotee is unbound. He's not affected himself by the moods around or the modes of nature around him. His mood is that which pleases Krishna. That's all. Simply whatever that may be, but it's simply the essence of it is to please Krishna. And that was the essence of Srila Prabhupada's mission, to please his Guru and Krishna. Whatever it took, whatever was needed. We can see in Prabhupada's poems, if you're fortunate enough to be aware of Srila Prabhupada's poem, when he arrived in Boston, the Markine Bhagavat Dharma, or on board the Jaladuta a few days earlier, prayers to the lotus feet, we can get a little bit of an idea of Prabhupada's mood. It doesn't define, it does a little bit, but not so much the mission. It defines the mood to fulfill the mission. Without the proper mood, the mission remains dry and lifeless practically. It's just a set of rules, institutional dogmas, or whatever you call it. It's the mood or the spirit which has caused the awakening of Krishna consciousness in others, or let's say, given life to the mission. It's the mood. It's not just being robotic, applying things, as they say, word for word, the law of the letter. Prabhupada said, bang. And then another place, Prabhupada said the opposite, bang. So then you have a quarrel, because neither one is seeing it from the absolute platform or understanding the actual mood behind it all. Whereas we're attached to the externals. Prabhupada took the externals because we're on the external platform and connected them to the spirit, to this internal. But unless we're also connecting to the internal, to the degree that we're connecting it, then the externals will also become compatible or effective. So yes, it's not, pure devotees are not basing, oh, I don't feel like chanting today. I don't feel like serving today. I don't feel like getting up today. You may feel or not feel, but when you love somebody, you do it anyway. Even we see with a mother and her child, oh, I don't feel like, way of looking after my baby today. Forget it, If a mother thinks like that, she's not a mother. Not a real mother anyway. No matter what, even in ill health, the mother will make arrangements to look after her child. But the pure devotee, no matter what's going on, is unflinching in their one-pointed. They're one-pointed in their intention. Prabhupada made this one-pointed statement in reference to his spiritual master's instruction. And this from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, emphasizing that my goal in life is to serve my spiritual master's instruction. Who cares about what I feel, about what I want? It's all based upon conditional past and hopeful future, dreaming of the future, instead of living in the present, which means how I can please my spiritual master. And we learn this from Srila Prabhupada so easily, how he sacrifices his life for his spiritual master's desire or instruction to him, ultimately Krishna's will. And if you read those poems, you'll see the mood of Srila Prabhupada, this surrendered mood. This is you could say, living with Prabhupada in the present is to cultivate this mood. And then it'll be easier to understand. We can hear from others to what relevant in what instructions are relevant according to time and circumstance. But the cultivation of this mood, this is our own personal responsibility for sure. And then become very clear also what mission, what aspects. Like Prabhupada received the instruction in 1922 to preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. But Prabhupada said, I practically wasted my time. He didn't, but he was feeling like that. 43 years passed before he actually eventually left India and traveled to the Western Hemisphere to preach Krishna consciousness. He was preparing, no doubt. Krishna was preparing him for this great mission, but he never gave up that instruction. It was just wasn't the right time. Prabhupada said that one time in America to him and said, why, Swamiji, did you not come earlier? He said, you were not ready earlier. According to time and circumstance. But the instruction remains eternal. It's just a matter of how to apply it, when to apply it, and where to apply it. So there's a spiritual mood which Srila Prabhupada has. And I'll just read another interesting stanza, another poem written by Prabhupada, which was his Vyasa Puja, homage to his own Guru Maharaj in 1935 or 6. Prabhupada wrote, as you know, it's a beautiful little poem that Prabhupada adore you all, a happy day, more blessed in heaven, sweeter than May. When he appeared at Puri, that holy place, my Lord and Master, his divine grace. He starts with that stanza. But the last stanza of that poem goes like this. The line of service as drawn by you is pleasing and healthy like morning dew. The oldest of all, but in new dress, miracle done, your divine grace. So I'd just like to emphasize the line there, but in new dress. It's the same essence, the same knowledge, the same goal, but in new dress, presented in a way which is attractive to the time, place, and circumstance. And that he was applying to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. So what to speak of our Srila Prabhupada, how he adjusted things to achieve the purpose. When he first came to America, Prabhupada even said then, I didn't know I was going to present this philosophy to these people. He said, when I start to talk about no meat, no fish, eggs, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, the first thing that they will say to me, Prabhupada said, the first thing they'll say is, Swamiji, go home. They would not be interested. Prabhupada didn't like he came with a formula. His formula was depending on Krishna. This is the essence. Taking shelter of Krishna, being humble, not thinking, I know how to do this. I've done this, I've done. Some fools think that Prabhupada was successful because he was a businessman or whatever, something crazy like that. A foolish mentality based on a material concept of life. But Prabhupada's success was wholly and solely because he completely surrendered to his spiritual master dependently, completely surrendered, fully dependent on the mercy of Krishna, with no other desire other than to satisfy his spiritual man. And he was willing to accept that which is favorable and reject that which is unfavorable, not just because it was this before, therefore it's this now. The essence is to awaken the spirit, Krishna consciousness, not just to do things and get external things achieved. It's to awaken the spiritual consciousness of the living entity. Prabhupada would tell, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj also, different stories to illustrate the nature of one who is kind of like, let's say, dead, almost you could half dead at least, if not dead, who just sticks to things because we did it 50 years ago. I don't care less if it works now. It doesn't mean anything. That isn't the mood of Prabhupada. Prabhupada did things, as you may know, like he gave Brahmin initiation to ladies, he gave sannyas to young men who were even teenagers still. He allowed men and women to stay in the ashram, be it separate from each other in rooms, but nonetheless, he had ladies leading kirtan, giving classes, and so on and so forth. Quite revolutionary, you could say, generally speaking, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line, and many other different things like that, you know. Prabhupada accommodated for the sake of awakening the spirit of Krishna consciousness in others. No matter who they were, he would somehow or another, he would be, you know, open to find or allow a method by Krishna's grace to be applied to achieve the goal, even in the face of criticism or whatever it may be. That wasn't Prabhupada even tolerated that for helping others to awaken Krishna consciousness, encouraging people. Well, one story he tells is it's called Nagnamatrika Nyaya. It's the philosophy that the mother is born naked, therefore she'd always be made naked, even in old age. Well, everyone knows that's mad. But this is a type of philosophy because it said, did that there, therefore we have to do it there, 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 and here. It might work, it might not. If we don't have the intelligence, we may experiment, but if it doesn't work, then we have to use, if there's any intelligence at all, we'll use a little intelligence to adjust. It's not just mechanical machinery. It's according to time, place, and circumstance. So that's one thing. And another story, and I don't know where it's from. I thought it was from Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and I couldn't find reference to it, but the story of the family well. Maybe some of you know the story. The family well. Once upon a time, there was the head of the family, the father, and they had this well in the garden. And the rule was everyone had to take all their water from the well, no matter what they were doing, washing clothes, bathing, drinking, this, that. The water had to come from the well. It was like part of the family tradition. So this was passed on after the head of the family left. His son became the head of the family, and the same law was applied. Everyone had to take their water from the well, and okay, then he got old and he handed over to his son. But in due course of time, as often is the case, the water in that well became contaminated. But it was the law that you have to take the water from that well no matter what, because that's our family tradition. Consequently, in due course of time, the members of the family were getting sick because the water was contaminated. But still, no, you have to take the water from the well, and then they were dying, but still they were insisting. It's just a story. To illustrate this, we say, unintelligent mentality or unintelligent application of instruction, which was specifically applicable in one situation and may not be applicable in another. Now I'm going to read a statement from Srila Prabhupada in this direction. To broadcast the cult of Krishna consciousness, one has to learn the possibility of renunciation in terms of country, time, and candidate. A candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about the renunciation of material existence, but one would teach candidates from a country like India in a different way. The teacher, the acharya, has to consider time, candidate, and country. Now, this is extremely important for all of us, even in our dealings, because now it's cultures in different countries are overlapping. There's different religions and cultures everywhere in the world now. It's not like India is Hindu and the West is Christian. They're all, and the Middle East is Muslim, and everywhere you find everything, practically speaking. And different devotees brought up in different parts of the world with different conditions and karmas, etc. It's important to try to think on this and understand that why aren't they listening? Maybe they've come from a different background and it just doesn't settle. He must avoid, the teacher rather, has to consider time, candidate, and country. He must avoid the principle of niyamagraha. That is, he should not try to perform the impossible. Although Prabhupada said impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary, after all, we are fools. So I guess the word does apply in our dictionary. So therefore, don't try to do the impossible in this situation, that which is applicable. There's a famous scientist, and I quote this many times. His name was Stephen Hawking. He left the world maybe 3 years ago. I don't know, some years ago. But one of his statements was, because he was a lifelong cripple, suffering from MND, his whole life he was just like materially like a cabbage or something. But he was still conscious, apparently, and very, very much intellectually conscious. Scientist, world famous scientist. And he said, the secret I tell everybody is to do what you can do, not what you cannot do. Of course, the pure devotee, there's no limit, you could say, but when we're not pure devotees, it's a little different. We may have to use it not to imitate others and try to do the impossible, but to do that which is practical. Okay. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. The Acharya's duty is to accept the essence of devotional service. There we go. The essence, the spirit of the law, not just the letter, the essence, the spirit. There may be a little change here and there as far as yukta vairagya, proper renunciation, is concerned. Dry renunciation is forbidden by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We've also learned from our spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj. The essence of devotional service must be taken into consideration and not the outward paraphernalia. The outward paraphernalia, which includes rules and regulations, it includes temples, it includes many things. Dress, this thing, that thing, labels, are only as much value as they help us to awaken our Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said they are an obstacle on the path of devotional service. Janananda Goswami wrote his Vaishnava Smriti, Hari Bhakti Vilas, which was specifically meant for India. In those days, India was more or less following the principle of Smarta Vidhi. Janananda Goswami had to keep pace with this, and his Hari Bhakti Vilas was compiled with this in mind. According to Smarta Brahmins, a person not born in a Brahmin family could not be elevated to the position of a Brahmin. And Prabhupada gave Brahmin initiation, as you know, to persons born as Chandalas, and were basically living like Chandalas a few months before they were initiated, and quickly elevated by the association of a pure devotee, and the fact that they accepted the instruction of the pure devotee, one becomes quickly elevated and qualified. And Prabhupada quotes this example. Sanatana Goswami, however, says that anyone can be elevated to the position of a Brahmin by the process of initiation. Yata kanchanatam nyati kankshang rasavidana dava tata diksha vidanina dvijatvam jayate ninam. As bell metal is turned into gold when mixed with mercury in an alchemical process, so one who is properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a Brahmana. We could break that down and discuss that in of itself, but that's not what we're going to do today. There is a difference between the Smarta process and the Goswami process. According to the Smarta process, one cannot be accepted as a Brahmin unless he is born in a Brahmin family. According to the Goswami process, which we follow, the Hari Bhakti Vilas and the Narada Pancharatra, anyone can be a Brahmin if he is properly initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. This is also the verdict of Shukadeva Goswami in Srimad Bhagavatam. Kirato hunanda pulinda pokasha abira shumba yavanaka sadhaya yen yecha papa yadapashraya shraya sudyanti tasmai prabha vishnave namaha. Kiratas, hunas, andras, pulindas, pukashas, abiras, sumbas, javanas, members of the Kasa race, and even others who are addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord due to his being the Supreme Lord, his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. A Vaishnava is immediately purified, provided he follows the rules and regulations of his bona fide spiritual master. It is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, or other Western countries. Simply imitating without effect is called niyama agraha. Not following the regulated principles, but instead living extravagantly is also called niyama agraha. The word niyama means regulated principle. Agraha means eagerness. The word agraha means not to accept. We should not follow regulated principles without an effect, nor should we fail to accept the regulated principles. Like to add there that the regulated principles may, by the arrangement of the Acharya, be applied more or less in different situations. There's always going to be some kind of principle. Every religion in the world has some kind of regulated principle, which varies according to time and circumstance. For instance, Jesus Christ gave a very simple, you could say, introductory step for those at that time, place, and circumstance. If you remain at that step one and you're absolutely adamant, there's no other step, that's it. You don't go no further. So you don't go no further. You stay where you are, and whatever the results of that are, that's what you get. Lord Buddha, for instance, another example, time, place, and circumstance, preached basically atheism because of time, place, and circumstances. Not that Lord Buddha is an atheist, or the goal of his whole movement was atheism, but it's taken like that because persons tend to get stuck at a certain platform. They could only understand, even Jesus said, there are many things I have to tell you, but you're not ready. You can't even follow the ones I'm telling you about. What to speak of more instruction, following the basics. So according to time and circumstance, the Acharya, and that may vary from one country to another, one culture to another, etc. What to speak of during time and place and circumstances. They teach that which is, say, digestible to the audience, but with the hope and the intention, of course, by the arrangement of Krishna, that later on, that the adherents, if they follow that, will be given a chance to move forward on their spiritual paths. But if they're adamantly, dogmatically, and even aggressively determined to remain where they are, then so be it. They won't be able to progress in spiritual life, because by the grace of Krishna, anything's possible. But generally, that's the situation. Where are we here? What is required, Prabhupada says here, is a special technique. A special technique according to country, time, and candidate. And it's interesting, Prabhupada's incorporation document, which was originally, by the way, the constitutional document of ISKCON, but from legal point of view, it became the incorporation document. He states there to teach the techniques of spiritual life. And as Prabhupada is saying here, a special technique according to country, time, and candidate. Without the sanction of the spiritual master, we should not try to imitate. This principle is recommended here. Shushka Varagya Jnana Sabha Nishedila. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's liberal demonstration of the Bhakti cult. We should not introduce anything whimsically without the sanction of the bona fide spiritual master. So there's a warning also, not that we should therefore compromise and start introducing our whimsical ideas of how to spread Krishna consciousness. There are, you could say, general time, place, and circumstance instructions, and there are detailed ones. The general ones are not to be meddled with. In other words, Srila Prabhupada's books are the law books for the next 10,000 years. The chanting of the holy name is the Yuga Dharma. These are certainly, and many others probably too, are certainly general principles which we don't change. Oh, it's no longer applicable. The holy name is no longer the Yuga Dharma. Now it's the something else, the unholy name. No, the chanting of Mahamantra is for this age and for every age is the most effective means. And it's a matter of how it's presented may vary. There is a time and circumstance situation, how to live in the present. Okay, 50 years ago when we first came to Krishna consciousness, in one sense, it's the same as it is today. In certain ways, it's different. Nowadays, we see that there's a lot of interest in vegetarianism, in yoga, in New Age philosophies and so on. So devotees, without giving up their principles, this is the secret, keeping the essential purpose in mind, are entering into various arenas and presenting Krishna consciousness, maybe with a slightly different dress, but the same ingredient inside. It's like when we were kids, our parents used to try to get us to take medicine, like probably all kids didn't like medicine. The very word medicine makes you cry. It's something horrible, because in itself it usually tastes horrible. So they would sugarcoat it, put it in some nice syrup or in a tablet which has sugar and some sugar inside it or something. So we would take the medicine. Oh, it's nice, sweet, nice. Inside is the bitter medicine, because we don't like to take bitter medicine. So sugar coating, as Srila Prabhupada did in the early days, with a wonderful, of course it's transcendental also, but wonderful prasadam. And he didn't even care. He said, later on, we'll introduce rules and regulations. Just get them to chant Hare Krishna, that's all. That will come naturally in the course of time. And engage any service, Prabhupada would accept whatever little service they would render, even the food they would bring, things they cook themselves. Prabhupada would accept it. He may not have ate it, but he would accept it and put it in the cupboard and maybe distribute it later or something, I don't know. But he would accept whatever little service, like children coming forward, you accept their service, even though it may not be very valuable in terms of what you're going to do with it. But the service mood has to be awoken. That's the main thing that the Acharya does, to awaken this service mood and then connecting it with Krishna somehow or another. And gradually, our spirit may awaken and our spiritual intelligence may start to develop like that. So time, place, and circumstance, time, countries, Africa, what applies in Africa, how to attract people in Africa, how to attract people in South America, in China, in Russia, in America, Australia, wherever it is, how to attract people may be slightly different than that, which is in India, where people are more or less familiar with Krishna consciousness. Whereas in America, it's a foreign thing where everyone's addicted to drugs and various kinds and sex and meat eating and gambling and so on. How to attract their attention, how to connect with Krishna. This is the essential feature. So in our modern situation, also devotees are going to yoga groups, and to a certain extent, they're not just sitting singing Hare Krishna. And of course, we have to be very careful. They may not be dressed in dhotis also. Prabhupada was concerned that his disciples were, when they were going on book distribution, were wearing plain clothes and wigs. And he was opposed to it at first, and that sometime they were distributing records, but when he heard that it increased the book distribution and they were following strict regulated principles at the same time, he allowed it. And at certain situation, we have to be careful that we don't miss the essence, which happened. The devotees then deviated from distributing books and just started doing records, and then they stopped doing records, and they started with records were Krishna conscious ones. In the beginning, they became non-devotional ones. Then they started selling non-devotional paraphernalia, and then they following non-devotional practices, and before you know it, they'd lost their Krishna consciousness and the very essence of the whole purpose behind it. The whole purpose was to distribute more books. It wasn't to make money. It was to distribute more books. But sometimes when our intelligence is not connected to the essence or to the source of the essence, then we can easily become bewildered in what we do. And we start to argue this, that, the other. And at other times, for instance, where was that now? I can't remember. In Calcutta, Srila Prabhupada, when he was in Calcutta, there was a lot of problems in the temple. The temple president was into business, and he was really ignoring the devotees. He wanted to do incense businesses and stuff to make money. He was into money, but the devotees were being somewhat ignored and living really beyond their capacity as far as austerities are concerned. They weren't quite ready for a diet with no sugar, no milk, no fruit. They were just taking rice dal and simple sabji, and they were getting very, they weren't very satisfied. They weren't pure devotees in the sense. They weren't on that advanced level of renunciation, and it was a problem. So when Prabhupada got there, he saw the devotees were very unhappy. So he called a group of devotees and formed a committee and said, you have to meet regularly to discuss what to do, how to deal with this. And after a few weeks, he said, don't do that anymore. We're not interested in these things. Everyone should come together and chant Hare Krishna. He just wanted them all to come here and chant about Krishna. So according to time and circumstance, what works, what brings about the desired effect in that sense. And the desired effect is not according to my desired effect, it's according to the goal or the mission of the pure devotee of the Lord. And by following in his footsteps and by applying the process of hearing and chanting, then we may start to develop the mood, that surrendered mood, that mood of total dependence on Krishna's mercy, not the one depending on our condition, a time, place, and circumstance condition, but the mood which remains ever. The externals may change, but the internals are ever, of course, they can evolve more and more and more, but in their essential form, they are eternal. It's a mood of one simply Krishnendriya, pleasing Krishna. That's the mood of a pure devotee. And following in his footsteps doesn't just mean imitating, it means cultivating this mood of surrender to Krishna. And that's just as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. We hear stories, the devotees were so surrendered. We used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, take a cold shower, and all day long, chanting, whatever you say, Prabhupada. We'll jump off the top of the Empire State Building. We'll do anything you say, Prabhupada. Okay, fine. But, doesn't necessarily mean we're doing that now. But the same mood should be there, but with intelligence, by the way. But that mood should be there now, that sincerity of purpose, that, that boldness, that desire to see the mission of Srila Prabhupada fulfilled, is spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, somehow or another, and putting our self-interest aside. It may have changed in its details or its external nature, but the internal is the same. How to spread. Now we use social media. Many of the young generation are expert. They're using social media, and someone say, Prabhupada said no. When the telex machine came in, Prabhupada said no. This will simply spread the gossip. And we can take it literally, and maybe we should take it literally if we're absorbed in gossip. Rubbish that sometimes, unfortunately, devotees sometimes get into fault finding, criticizing, using the media for this. This is a terrible, unfortunate deviation. And we should not indulge in these things or waste our time listening to this stuff. We have more than enough to get on with, hearing and chanting about Krishna rather than, talking about our gripes or someone else's problems, etc. Get on with our business to help us to develop the mood, Srila Prabhupada's mood. Prabhupada himself, although he was pained by it, divorced himself more or less from the Gaudiya Math issues so that he could concentrate on what he had to do. He didn't want to do that, but because it was unfavorable, he did it. And then later on, he divorced himself from India practically because it was unfavorable. But later on, he wanted to go back in there and to try to, incorporate, try to unite, etc., try to introduce whatever it is in a situation, but that time it wasn't right, it wasn't suitable. Later on, he attempted also. So we haven't got time to waste on these things. Time, place, and circumstance. Whatever place we're in, whatever circumstance we're in, the same general principle applies. We should try to absorb as much as we can in hearing and chanting about Krishna as given by the acharyas. And Prabhupada one time said we should rack our brains how to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. And he said it's the best way to control your mind, not by some mechanical process, but by applying our mind in this way. Now, again, we have to be careful that we don't just impose our conditional, we could say, desires and likes and dislikes in a way. I think we could apply. I remember one devotee in England, he was somewhat addicted to drinking liquor. So he thought the best way to apply Krishna consciousness is go to the pubs and preach to the drunkards. Well, he tried, and unfortunately, he became a drunkard again. We may not be strong enough for that. The principle is not necessarily bad, but we have to have a little intelligence, common sense. We are not Nityananda Ram, who can do things like that. We follow in his footsteps, and that which was not impossible. We're not so great, advanced devotees. Sure enough, Prabhupada, again, time and circumstance, in San Francisco one time, Janananda Prabhu asked Srila Prabhupada, because Janananda Prabhu, probably amongst all the disciples of Prabhupada, was everyone special, but he was most special in many ways. And Prabhupada loved Janananda very, very much. Janananda Prabhu was very compassionate. The mood of a pure devotee is absolute compassion to all living entities, because we're all part and parcel of Krishna. Every living entity. Prabhupada would cry to see that living entities were not connecting to Krishna, because they belong to Krishna. And it means Krishna is sad that his parts and parcels have separated themselves from him. So Prabhupada was also in that mood of compassion to reconnect them to Krishna. So Janananda picked up on that also maybe by his nature from previous lives or advanced consciousness, and he would preach to everyone and anyone. He had no envy, no expectation. He would just preach to everyone, give everyone a chance to become Krishna conscious, especially drunks and down and outs. He was expert in encouraging them. He asked Prabhupada, how can I preach to them, Srila Prabhupada? They're all drunkards, they're all drinking liquor. Prabhupada simply said, when they drink their liquor, just ask them to say, thank you, Krishna, for the taste in this liquor. Simple as that. And then say, Hare Krishna. Simple. It's not like, not so complicated, but Prabhupada was seeing like that, how to engage even animals, all living entities in relationship with Krishna. For people, give them food, give them prasadam, somehow. See, many of these things are just the same now. We just have to learn the techniques of presenting the Krishna consciousness in a way which will be digestible to the people, to wherever we are. It will differ, it will change. There's another side to it too, is what inspires us to be an instrument for that. And different devotees will be affected differently by various things, maybe by dress, maybe by language, maybe by techniques, etc. So it's not like a black and white thing. The essence is clear as a bell if we really, are lucky to have grasped it. And the essential method is clear, but the details of presentation of that message and etc. may vary according to time and circumstance when dealing with people, as Prabhupada did, who were elderly, different religions, different philosophies, different cultures, different ages, etc. And Prabhupada would adjust and address them differently, as we've already heard, in terms of what is my mission, etc. But the mood remains ever deepening our surrender, our dependence on Krishna. And the boldness is not, the devotees were so bold in the past and they're not bold anymore, does not need to apply. That's you could say, a relative perspective. It may be true, but it's relative. That boldness, or that being willingness to take that risk for Srila Prabhupada to spread Krishna consciousness, going out there only if necessary, on the social media and preaching on the social media wherever is possible. Whatever is possible, whichever method is possible to spread the message of Krishna consciousness within intelligent reason, using common sense. Okay, our time is running. It's 12:04. Well, I'll just read a little bit more, I think. Let's see. Okay, this is important. I think we met. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments on these points by quoting 2 verses of Rupa Goswami. Anashtasya Vishayanyatara Mupiyunjitaha Nibandha Krishna Sambandha Yukta Varaga Uchite Papanchatiya Buddhya Hari Sambandhi Vastanu Mukshabhi Pabdyago Varagam Pava Kalchite. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. because everything is related to Krishna. Preaching means to relate to Krishna, whatever we can. So to preach the Bhakti cult, one should seriously consider these verses, Prabhupada says. And we could go on and on with different examples. We could say. It's like we're giving an example Prabhupada writes here. In a lecture in Delhi one time, he said, in the Western countries, the boys and girls, they mix very freely. And if I say, my dear boy, you cannot see even a young girl, then finished. Because in Vedic culture, brahmachari, unless married, you wouldn't even see a girl, you wouldn't think of a girl. Prabhupada said, if I try to introduce this, then finished. Nothing will happen. My business there is finished. Therefore, I have to arrange according to the country, according to circumstances, as far as possible. So gradually they are coming to the perfectional stage. So we have to adopt Desha Kala Patra, according to time, according to circumstance. But we're keeping our principles as it is, but making arrangement according to the circumstance, that is required. Many times Prabhupada emphasized this point of time, place, and circumstance. Okay. May finish there, but there may be some questions. And if there are no questions, we'll read some more. Yeah. Any questions, please put them on the chat or whatever method you have. Take a few minutes. In the meantime, I just read one or two more things. And we mentioned earlier how Prabhupada's spiritual master and asked him to preach in the Western world, basically, all over the world, particularly in the West. It's his desire. Prabhupada fulfilled that to his best capacity. And it's our mission to continue to spread that principle in the Western world, or wherever we are, if we're in India or in China, Australia, Russia, wherever we are, to try to spread that message of Krishna consciousness, the knowledge of our relationship with Krishna and our eternal nature, and the method to realize our eternal nature, Nam Sankirtan, all over the world in whatever way we can, irrelevant of the dress or the language or the whatever, but to try to awaken that within others' hearts. This is our mission. But Srila Prabhupada, as we heard earlier, was thinking in India. Sometimes Prabhupada would confide in us how his Guru Maharaj ordered him to preach in the West. He said, my Guru didn't specifically order me to preach in India. So whenever I preached in the West, I was very successful. So his idea was to build temples in Vrindavan and Mayapur. Prabhupada's idea, this is our problem. Prabhupada's idea was to build temples in Vrindavan and Mayapur for his Western devotees to come. He wasn't thinking Indian. He was thinking these temples in Mayapur, Vrindavan, were for his Western disciples to come to India and have shelter and the opportunity to reside in the Holy Dham. Yeah. But then he said, how could he stand by and see India going to hell? Seeing how Indians were giving away their culture by following the West and becoming degraded in various ways of losing Krishna consciousness was disturbing to Srila Prabhupada. He said it was his personal mission to preach in India, because you see at the heart, Bharat Varsh, Bharat Bhumi, in the land of so-called religion, people are giving it away and adopting Western culture. So Prabhupada was very, and his method there, he brought Western devotees there to India to preach. And it really was quite revolutionary. It shocked so many people, Western sannyasis, boys, and married couples, women coming, ladies coming and giving classes and leading kirtans in front of Indian audiences was quite extraordinary, and had an amazing effect on bringing people a little bit more back to their culture. Yeah, and again, it wasn't like Prabhupada did things whimsically, and we shouldn't either. We have our association to make decisions. We have prayer. The Lord is in the heart. We have scriptures. We refer. We don't just whimsically do things. We do have to use our intelligence in this. We are even a self-realized soul. Prabhupada one time, Brahmanan said that Prabhupada told him that when he was in Los Angeles, Prabhupada was in Los Angeles, he went before Lord Dwarkadish and personally spoke to him, the deities, and the deities ordered him, you have to go back to India and you have to organize the preaching there. But we can't imitate that. It would be imaginary. We check that with our, whatever, Guru Shastra, Sadhu, etc. So just go back, see if there are any questions. There is a question here from Rasikananda. How can we let go of what we want and do what Srila Prabhupada wants? I mentioned hearing and chanting about Krishna to help develop the mood of surrender. How can we let go of what we're attached to and always wanting to do what I want? Of course, this is the process of devotional service, and it doesn't always happen overnight. We have to at least have some process in place to come into the daytime. Otherwise, we'll always stay in the night. If you only lived in it, Prabhupada gives an example that there are certain insects that only live at night. They only see the night. They don't know about the day. They're born at night. They reproduce at night. They live and eat at night, and they die at night before the sun rises. All they know is night. They don't know the existence of days. Certain creatures are like that. But if we really want to stay in the night, we don't want to come into the light, what can be done? The desire has to be there. If we don't really have it, if it's just lip service and just what we've heard, there's something better than nothing. At least we have some idea that this should be there. But if we really want that change, the desire has to be cultivated. Desires are cultivated usually in association of those who are more advanced in Krishna consciousness. It can come from within, of course, by Krishna's grace, but generally it's in the association of those who are more advanced. So that desire to let go of our attachments in the material. Now, Krishna does his part. Sometimes he gives us a painful experience. We hear this in the case of Tulsi Das or Bilvamangal Thakur and others, how they had a kind of an eye-opening experience and gave up their illusions for the worldly flesh, etc. Sometimes it comes naturally in old age, maybe after a lifetime of endeavor. We may get some realizations and start to regret the fact that we were indulging in self-centered activities. But the best thing is we try not to wait for those two to happen or not happen, but that we make a sincere endeavor, understanding the importance of it, and try to cultivate knowledge. It helps a lot, of course. Knowledge, hearing about it, and then associating with devotees, and I'm trying to be engaged in devotional service, even though these desires are there. So if the desire may still be there for these material things, but we're trying to influentially engage in devotional service. There are some very nice verses in the 11th canto, I think it's chapter 20, I can't remember exactly, describing the situation of a devotee who's still attached to his previous karmic desires and things, activities, etc., but continues engaging in devotional service, etc. I can't remember the exact verses, but there's some very nice verses there, how by that sincere endeavor to continue engaging in devotional service in the association of devotees and praying for the Lord's mercy that gradually these remnants, or whatever they are, of our past karmic sojourns will fade away, or they will not affect us anymore. They may be there, but they won't have any strong effect on our mood or our consciousness. Weak because we're spiritually weak, we're easily carried away by these previous impressions, and our mood changes. We become suddenly depressed, or suddenly lusty, or suddenly bewildered, whatever it may be, angry or something, because we're weak, spiritually weak. So we have to gain spiritual strength in order not to succumb to these previous activities. So simultaneously, the two things may be going on. It may not happen immediately. They maybe some occasions it can happen immediately. We let go, but usually it takes some time. And Prabhupada's art there was to engage as much as we can those previous karmas in Krishna service, so we can gradually purified of identifying ourselves with them. For instance, if you happen to be, an artist or something, Prabhupada would engage you in paintings for Krishna and for the movement. Or if you're a singer, or if you're a technician, if you're a builder, if you're an accountant, a lawyer, a dentist, whatever you are, it can be engaged in Krishna's service. In this way, we can gradually become purified. And if it can't be directly engaged, then we try to utilize that platform for preaching Krishna consciousness. You don't have to give it up, but it's a matter of purifying or Krishnizing that situation. Another expertise of a pure devotee is to engage people according to their propensity, Varna Ashram system, which Prabhupada wanted to introduce into our movement. That's a big topic for today, is Varna Ashram, how to if at all, how to apply it. And so Prabhupada one time said no. Lord Chaitanya said, no, this age you can't do. And he was just saying, just chant Hare Krishna at times for this are gone. But then later on, Srila Prabhupada said, now we must introduce Varna Ashram. And when Prabhupada was asked, but you said, Prabhupada, this is not for this age, we can't do it. And Prabhupada said, you were not ready then, but now it must be done. This is in this last year or so. Prabhupada emphasized Varna Ashram a lot, because it's necessary for people who are materially inclined, especially. And Prabhupada said, "It's no." When he was asked, "Is this for the outsiders?" Prabhupada said, "No, it's for the devotees." He said, because they're not really up to the Brahminical standard. They need this also to engage them happily and effectively in devotional service. Again, it's a question of imitation. We sometimes expect everyone to come to the Brahminical platform. Well, that would be nice. And maybe in the long run it will be, but you can't expect that in the beginning or in medium stage. People have different propensities, different conditionings. The art is to engage them according to their situation, not according to ours. Prabhupada wanted Brahminical head in society, but Brahminical head is very broad-minded. It's not narrow-minded, thinking everyone has to become a Brahmin. It's to engage everyone according to their nature and propensity in Christian service. You're not going to expect everyone to follow the regulated principles. You're not going to expect everyone to follow the etiquettes, etc., etc. Etiquettes are variable according to time and circumstance. And the Acharya has to see how to let go. You pray to Krishna by the mercy of Krishna. These things, Krishna can take them away. It's not possible on our own, so we need the help of devotees. We need Krishna's mercy. We can have our desires. Prabhupada said in his poem, by your will they've fallen in Maya, by your will they can be delivered. So it's by the will of Krishna. We have to, ultimately we have to depend on Krishna's mercy to get free of these things. We haven't got the strength. Daivi yesha gunamai, mamamaya taratya, mameve ekapadinte mayamitam tarantite. That material energy is very, very strong, very powerful. One cannot overcome it on our own. Only those who surrender unto me cross beyond it. So surrendering, taking shelter of Krishna, praying to Krishna for help. Okay, another one here. There's a few actually down the line here. There's one here from, I don't know who it's from. It's from 530U. I don't know who 530U is, but whoever you are, thank you very much. Pardon? Okay, someone's online there, 530U. I think I recognize you. I hope you didn't get flooded. Did you get flooded? You're okay, because this week we've had some beautiful weather here in Europe. It's middle of July. And today, at last, the sun is shining. I mean, the first time I can remember that for a while, practically speaking. But about 3 or 4 days ago, it rained nonstop all day. And they said it was the most rain in any day for a century. And many parts of Europe got flooded. But, I guess it's all died down now. Yes, then how can we know if things are just manufactured by Western mindset and not anymore? As it is, but rather speculation instead of things are being adopted according to time, place, and circumstance. Yeah, this is the expected question. would be surprised if someone didn't ask that rather. And it comes up all the time. It's synthesizing the traditional with the modern, or whatever you want to call it, whether, which way to go. In a society where there's rapidly changing externals around us, and there's supposed to be, this is why we're supposed to have a system. Prabhupada put in place a system. It may not be infallible, but it is nonetheless less fallible than our own minds usually, of a Sangha, association of us, to discuss what is appropriate. Of self-realized soul is even described by Narahari Sharakor in his, is it called? I can't remember what it's called, some book which he compiled, that in the age of Kali, even Uttama Bhagavats are sometimes perplexed how to apply the absolute in time, place, and circumstance. It is very complicated and confusing, I could say. But don't worry, Krishna is in the heart. And if sincerity is there, then Krishna, even if we do appear to do something which is not appropriate or mistake, it won't be a real mistake. The real thing is we're trying to do that which will please my Gurudev and Krishna. Yes, and even if we're not so, we may be a little bit kind of spaced out or materialistic or whatever, or misled. And nonetheless, if we're sincerely referring it back to our spiritual master and Krishna. Now that includes the Sangha of devotees, not that we separate it as if we're some great personality who doesn't need to be corrected, who doesn't need the Sangha of devotees, who has a better idea than everyone else who's been in the movement 10 times longer than me and has been following regulated principles for 50 years. Nonetheless, I'm that special person who knows how. No, that isn't the method. There has to be humility, submissiveness, and Sangha involved there to inquire kind of confidentially from those who are worth inquiring from. And ultimately, Krishna will give you the intelligence to decipher or to discriminate between what's the best and what's not. But at every, even at the advanced stage, one still discusses it with others as to, whether this is appropriate or is this just my speculation. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did it, Srila Prabhupada did it, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj did it, even the pure devotees and the Lord himself do. They discuss these things with others around them, showing the principle and prayer. And ultimately, there's in the heart when something, mood, there's different types of moods also. Moods are sometimes temporary according to circumstance, and there's a consistency of mood. So as our consistency of mood develops, which is selfless and pure for Krishna's pleasure, then it becomes clear and clear. Krishna directly guides the devotee within the heart. But there's bound to be mistakes. As a child, make mistakes in growing, but it's not wrong for the child to grow. So as we grow, and we have to be, if we want to, willing to be corrected, and not like a spoiled child who insists that they're always right, but willing to be corrected on our paths. One question: how best to introduce new people to Krishna consciousness? I've been giving copies of Bhagavad Gita to a few meditation students to introduce the ideas of philosophy, understanding time and circumstance. What can be said about the next steps once an introduction has been made? Again, of course, you can't give a black and white answer so easily to that, because everywhere in the world is different, and students and we're different. We can't do what we can't do, but usually we look to those who've had some success in this regards and take inspiration, although the details may have to be varied, but the principle is the same. They've made a facility which is attractive for the next stage, understanding what type of, let's say, thing that their audience are interested in, and doing likewise. Like Prabhupada, when he was preaching in America in the early days, he could see that most of his students were pretty revolutionary, anti-authority. Not anti-authority point blank, but anti the authority that exists, anti-structure, society, religion, this, that, the other. So not to say that he consciously took advantage of that, but he did, in sending his devotees out all over the world as pioneers, missionaries, etc. It's like, front line army or something. he sent them all out over the world to preach in unique situations, taking great risks, because that's what they wanted to do. It was like they was fulfilling their whatever desires to create a new order in society. So he did that. That may not be the mood of people now so much. I don't know. It may not be. Maybe they're more into healthy living, environmentalism. So we try to take them, or try to create an environment or a sangha or an association where this can be something they can get their teeth into, maybe get some land and start growing things naturally or in their gardens or something or another, and then teaching how to offer it to Krishna and try to understand the connection between all these various aspects of nature with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's just so many different things that one can do. And maybe it could be anything. It could be another thing. It could be a city community or whatever. Just seeing ways that people are interested to be a part, to help people to feel they are a part, that they're needed, that they're, they have value in relationship with Krishna. Not expect people to become like clones or robots, but how they can become a valuable, as they are, a valuable, let's say, part, and a valuable person in relationship with Krishna. Something which will excite them, something which they can feel they're contributing in such a way, not just philosophy. Prabhupada said, our movement is not armchair philosophy, it's practical application of the philosophy in our lives. Not necessarily changing what we're doing, but learning how to do that for Krishna. And it's not just give money as we sometimes think. No, it's to engage our propensities. Not you can do, but not primarily, not the fruits of our work, but the work itself in Krishna's service. That's the next stage. To engage the work itself in whatever it is. How can I engage in Krishna's service? If we can take people to that stage, whatever it may be recreational, it may be practical, it may be whatever it may be, but some or another to engage or connect people in a way that they feel that there's a place for them in Krishna's movement, in ISKCON movement, or whatever movement it is. There's a place for them in relationship with Krishna. They belong there. And every situation will be somewhat different. Different countries will have different situations to a certain extent, and different people have different circumstances and different situations. So that can be individual. If a person is 80 years old, you may not, and they were a bricklayer their whole life, you may not say, well, you should come and build our houses for us. But you may say, oh, you can give us some advice how we can build our houses. A little bit of common sense would have to be involved there. But it's a very essential part of devotional service. That's what it means. To engage devotional service, to engage our mind and senses in the service of Krishna favorably. So the preacher has to see how to encourage that person to want to engage their mind and senses in Krishna's service. They may be a driver, okay? Maybe they'd like to drive the devotees somewhere or drive somewhere to do some service. Everyone's got something which they can connect with Krishna. It's not just philosophy, but it's actual practical engagement of our body, mind, and senses in relationship with Krishna. Next one. One question I had for a while is for those not initiated, how to correctly chant the Maha Mantra. Is pronunciation more important, or can local dialects be used? That's interesting. Again, time, place, and circumstance. Prabhupada talks about this on a few occasions. Some devotees were very insistent. Prabhupada said, what is this Hari Ramo? Or something like that, Krishna, Krishna. Well, Prabhupada said about the Chinese, we know, not always, but in most cases, have a hard time with the letter R. It often comes out like Krishna, Krishna almost. Or in South America, they have a hard time with the letter J. It comes out Yaya. Yaya Prabhupada, Yaya Prabhupada, etc., etc. Does that mean that Prabhupada doesn't accept it? Of course he does, because the intent is there. The local dialects are not so important in the sense of worrying. However, we would all like to say, if you have a friend from another place, you do your best to try to pronounce their name. And it's the mood behind it, not the external letter. It's the mood behind it. which you accept. You know, it's like a child. If you have children, a child says, mama, 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 mama. You know, he's calling his mummy. But why don't you pronounce it properly, you stupid kid? Obviously, the mother's not going to say that. She's going to smile like anything and embrace her child. Because the child said, Mahama, 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 Daha, or whatever, trying to say mummy, daddy. So the parents are delighted. They're absolutely delighted. They don't, in any way, they encourage. And they know what the child wants. And they know what the child's saying because it's the mood. The affectionate mood is there. So developing that affectionate mood is more important. Like, we're not Sanskrit scholars. Now, if you can pronounce it properly, then do it. But if you can't, do your best. Krishna understands everything. He understands, and Prabhupada said, it doesn't matter. In South India, they sometimes say Krishna, Krishna. It's not Krishna, Krishna. Almost like Khrushchev. It's Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna, some pronounce it. So it doesn't matter. In Bengal, it's, I can't pronounce it, I'm not Bengali, but it's Rama. It's not Ramo. Sometimes people have no sense of hearing and they think it's Ramo. It's not Rama. It's a little different. So they pronounce the soft A. You know, different things are there. But we try our best to pronounce it properly. And if it's a local dialect, Prabhupada didn't seem to make a big issue, to be honest. It doesn't matter. Krishna knows what you're doing. But try to be attentive. Try to be sincere. Try your best to pronounce it nicely. It's like when we're calling someone by name, we try to pronounce their name nicely. They're very, it's encouraged if we do that. They know that we're showing respect, etc. Thank you. Well, it's 11:30, 12:30. I don't know. What time is it there? 11:30, exactly. I guess we have to finish. Well, nice to be with you all. Thank you very, very much. Is that right?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for the wonderful points you've shared in the lecture today. Lots of thought-provoking, and thank you for answering the questions as well. So yeah, we'll end here. The next session will be at 2 p.m. UK time with His Grace Keshavanand Prabhu. He'll be talking about Srila Prabhupada's books, Simple Yet Deep. So he's going to be speaking about that topic. Once again, thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank
for taking
you.
the time out and sharing your realizations on this topic.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, all blessed to Srila Prabhupada. No, yeah, well, hopefully we'll see you again one day. We'd like to thank all the devotees who've been online today for sharing your association, and wish you all the best in both in one's own life, not to imitate, but to practically apply the principle of Krishna consciousness in the intelligent, best way we can, and to share it with others in whatever way you can. There's so many ways to share Krishna consciousness nowadays. So many ways. So much easier than before in many ways. Maybe the confusion is more how, but the means, or let's say the field for sharing Krishna consciousness has grown so bigger. You just have to know, we become expert farmers, we could say, planting those seeds of Krishna consciousness. If you're a farmer, you have to know what the soil's like, you have to know what the weather's like, you have to know the local, say predators or difficulties that may come along. You have to learn from those who are more experienced, and some experimentation sometimes there. You don't continue, just because you like wheat, you don't continue growing wheat when the soil is unfavorable and there's too much rain, and there's all these other creatures around there living in that area and other plants that just love to destroy wheat. You have to use your common sense and see what grows in that place. Maybe it's good for potatoes, maybe it's good for beans, maybe it's good for flowers. You have to see what it's good for, and then use your common sense and do the needful. So you have to see, according to different places, what grows, how the seed grows in that place. Otherwise you won't get any crop. We're just wasting our time treading water, as they said. Or like an anchor in the ground when we're trying to row a boat, it's not going to go very far. So we have to use a little common sense. What works in one place, as Prabhupada said earlier, may not be applicable in another. Details, but the print of what we're applying is the same, But how we apply it, what label we put on it, what dress we put on it, etc., may vary. It may vary. We have to see what is applicable without compromise. So we must keep the essence strongly in mind. Always the goal. Okay. And again, you could give another example in sport. You know, if you're playing a different team, you have to, the goal is to go same for both teams, but you're playing a different team. You may have to adjust your tactics slightly to defeat this team and to defeat that team. Common sense has to be applied. Hare Krishna. Okay, everyone, thank you very much. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.
Hari
Thank you
Bol,
so
Hari
much.
Bol. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Jai
Krishna.
Shri
Krishna.
Prabhupada, Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Jai Maharaj. Jai.
Jai Guru Maharaj.
Jai
Jai.
Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna.
Bol. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Hare Bol Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.